You sit down to work on something important. Within 90 seconds, you have checked your phone, opened a tab you did not intend to open, thought about 3 other things you should be probably doing instead, and felt a low grade anxiety you cannot quite name. But that has somehow convinced you in the span of 90 seconds that the most urgent thing you could do is absolutely anything other than this. I'm Dr. Scott Scher, and welcome back to Cellular Truth. What you've just experienced is not a discipline problem. It is not laziness. It is your nervous system reading stillness as a threat for responding exactly the way it was trained to respond. The reason it was trained that way, what is actually happening in your brain biology when you try to focus, explains why every productivity system you've ever tried works for a week and then stops. Here's what gets my attention as a clinician. Patients who describe themselves as unable to focus, who jump from task to task, cannot build a meditation practice, pick up a new skill, and abandon it before it gets traction. They almost never have an attention problem. What they have is a nervous system trained through thousands of small repetitions to read settling into one thing as a signal that something is being missed. And here's a number that will reframe how seriously you can take this, and you should take this. Chronic task switching and constant interruptions temporarily lower your effective IQ by up to 10 points. More cognitive impairment in control research. In this video, I will explain exactly what is happening in your brain when that number becomes real and why the 10-minute rule, this is something that I've developed, is the most direct biological intervention I have found for it. Stay tuned. Here's what we're going to cover first. What is actually happening in the brain when you try to focus, your nervous system resists. The biology is specific, and it's not what the productivity industry says it is. Second, the IQ cost of task switching and why it matters more than you think. And third, the 10-minute rule, what it is, why it works at the cellular level, and how to apply it, including one specific tool that has personally made the rule usable on my hardest days. And I'll be straight with you where the research ends and where the clinical observations take over. Here's what it feels like from the inside. You open the document. You know you're supposed to write it. You have done this kind of thing 1,000 times. And within 60 seconds, sometimes even 30 seconds, or even smaller than that, something in you starts scanning. Not for anything specific, just scanning. An itch towards the phone, a pull towards a different tab, a sudden seemingly important thought about something completely unrelated that feels urgent enough to derail the next 20 minutes. You override it, you come back, 30 seconds later, it happens again. This is not procrastination in the way the productivity world defines it. You're not avoiding the work because you do not want to do it. You are experiencing a genuine low-level alarm response. Your nervous system flagging the act of settling into one thing as a potential threat. Every time you try to focus, the alarm fires. Every time the alarm fires, your attention fragments. And every time your attention fragments and you follow it, you teach the alarm that it was right. Now stay with me here, because what I want to show you is what is happening in the brain when the alarm fires. Because once you can see it at the cellular level, the 10-minute solution, the 10-minute rule as I call it, stops feeling like a productivity hack. It starts making complete biologic sense. It's so crazy because the productivity and focus industry have a clear explanation of this pattern. You're dopamine addicted to novelty. Your phone has trained you to need constant stimulation. You have a short attention span, possibly a disorder. The solution, of course, is more discipline, time blocking, app blockers, cold turkey social media detox, the Pomodoro technique, deep work rituals. The truth is actually some of this. Phones have genuinely recalibrated the reward system for many people. Novelty seeking is a real neurologic phenomenon, and these tools can often help. But, and this is the but here, they address symptoms without touching the biological mechanisms underneath, which is why they work for a while and then they stop. And then you feel worse for having failed yet again with another productivity system. This is what the standard model misses. The problem is not that your brain has become addicted to novelty. Exactly. The problem is that your brain has learned through thousands of small, repeated experiences that stillness is where things get missed. And there's an evolutionary reason for this. I'll talk about it. That settling into one thing means that other things are not being monitored. And for our nervous system, especially if it's running in chronic stress, looking away from the environment is a threat signal, not a rational one, not a conscious one, a real one, running underneath the productivity techniques, making them feel effortful in a way that has nothing to do with willpower. Stay with me here, because this is the part that changes how you see the problem, because the biology of what happens when you try to focus is genuinely surprising, and the IQ data makes it so hard to look away. Let's get into the cellular mechanisms here. Your brain has a threat detection center called the amygdala, a small structure deep inside the brain. Think of it as your brain's smoke detector. It's fast, automatic, and completely indifferent to your productivity goals. Its job is to flag anything in the environment that could be a threat and pull your attention toward it. When you're in a state of chronic low-grade stress, which is the baseline for so many of us in 2026, this smoke detector runs a lower threshold than it should. It takes less to trigger it. And one of the things that triggers it, particularly in the brain conditioned by years of context switching and notification culture, is the act of sustained attention on a single thing. Here's the part that I find genuinely darkly funny as a physician. Your brain was designed to scan your environment for threats evolutionarily, right? Constant scanning kept your ancestors alive for 200,000 years. What it was not designed for is a world where scanning the environment means checking a phone that contains a system engineered by some of the best behavioral scientists alive, specifically to make sure that scanning never feels finished, that there's always one more thing to see, and that stopping feels like missing out. FOMO, right? Fear of missing out. Your 200,000-year-old threat detector brain has met its match. And for most of us, we have lost terribly. And that loss is an IQ loss. chaos here, right? Because the researcher who's shown this, Dr. Glenn Wilson at the Institute of Psychiatry, University of London, found that constant interruptions and task switching produce a temporary drop of up to 10 IQ points in effective problem-solving ability. To put that in perspective, that is more than twice the cognitive impairment measured in studies on marijuana use. And this is not a productivity inconvenience. It's a measurable temporary reduction in capacity to think. Here's an example. Think of your working memory, the mental workspace where you hold information while you're using it. It's like a whiteboard. Every time you switch tasks, again, you're not multitasking, you're switching tasks. Someone partially erases the whiteboard. You can see some of what's there, but the clarity is gone. And writing new things on top of the smudge makes everything harder to read. The more you switch, the more you smudge the board and the more smudgy it becomes until the cognitive work you are trying to do is happening on a surface that can barely hold the information you need. And recovering from task switching actually takes much longer than most people think. Research from the University of California, Irvine, found that after a single interruption, one single interruption, can take an average of 23 minutes to fully return to a task. 23 minutes, it's crazy. The average employee is interrupted every 2 minutes during the workday. Every 2 minutes. The math just doesn't work. Here is where the mechanism goes deeper. And then really the productivity research really have been able to go so far. And this is what gets super interesting in my world, right? So chronic context switching does not just impair cognition in the moment. It keeps the nervous system in a low-grade version of what is called the cell danger response, the CDR. If you haven't heard of the CDR before, I've spoken about it, but in brief, the CDR is an alarm system inside every cell of your body. When the nervous system signals threat, the CDR activates, diverting cellular energy away from repair, recovery, and growth towards defense and monitoring. A nervous system that is constantly switching, constantly scanning, constantly being interrupted, never receives a sustained enough signal to allow the CDR to settle. The cellular alarm stays on, quietly, before the threshold of what most people could call stress, but present enough to make the tools that should be working, the sleep protocols, the supplements, the focus techniques, land less effectively than they should. The short version is this: task switching is not just making you less productive. It is keeping your cells in a state that works against every other health intervention you are trying to make. The brain and the body are not separate problems. They are attached to each other. Right? So let's talk about what happens at this beautiful 10-minute mark. When you first try to settle into a task, the amygdala, that fear center, fires a mild threat signal. Something is being missed. The environment is not being monitored. Your stress hormone, cortisol, kicks up slightly. Your dopamine, the brain's motivation and reward chemical, drops briefly because a novelty has stopped arriving. The combination feels like restlessness, anxiety, the urge to switch, the urge to scan further into what you're doing. This is the hardest part of any focus session. It typically peaks in the first 5 to 10 minutes. If you stay through that window, if you do not follow the urge to check something else, something specific happens around the 10-minute mark. The threat signal from the amygdala begins to ease. The brain receives evidence that nothing bad happened by settling. Cortisol starts to normalize, and the task itself begins to generate its own dopamine signal as engagement deepens and small progress becomes perceptible. The alarm hands off to the reward system. Focus becomes self-sustaining. Now, let me be clear with you. There is no research specifically on this 10-minute rule. This is something that I've seen in clinical practice time and time again. And in my own personal productivity hacks, this has been the most important. The exact number is an inference. It can change from person to person. It might be 8 minutes, it might be 12. The principle is more important than the precise figure. What's also important here to know is that a concentration practice like this has an effect on that cell danger response. Every time you stay through the alarm window and focus deepens, you send a signal of safety to the nervous system. You're telling the cellular alarm through evidence, not intention, that stillness is not a threat. Let me repeat that. Stillness is not a threat. We don't have to be moving and changing and doing all the time. Nothing is bad happen to you when you stop scanning. Done consistently, this is how the brain rewires that smoke detector. And it's crazy, but here is the part the productivity industry consistently skips. Even if you want to concentrate, even if you want to try this, right? The 10-minute rule does not work the same way for everyone. And the reason is cellular, not motivational. This is where my rule may not work, okay? If your baseline stress level is high, if you are genuinely depleted, if your nervous system has been running a survival program for months, the amygdala threshold is lower and the initial alarm is louder. 10 minutes can feel genuinely impossible. And I have patients like this for sure. Not uncomfortable, impossible. That's where you are. The work underneath the rule matters first. This is what I've talked about a lot, something I've mentioned before as the sympathetic spiral of doom. Chronic sympathetic activation, chronic mitochondrial dysfunction. You have to address the sequence by optimizing energy first. And you do this in a number of different ways. Consistent sleep, daily movement, regular meals are really important. Breaking that cycle, and you can see other videos where I talk about the sympathetic spiral in more detail. But once you understand the mechanism, the first 5 to 10 minutes of any focused work session are not a test of your discipline. There are the alarm window. Your job in that window is to not feel focused. What it really is just simply not switch. The alarm will fire, the urge to check something will arrive. The pull towards a different task will feel urgent. Your job is to observe it and stay anyway. Not because staying is comfortable, and because you know what is happening. The alarm is not telling you something is wrong. It is telling you that novelty has stopped arriving, which is exactly what is supposed to happen when you are doing the deep work. Once you are past the window, once you've actually owned that task and have momentum, maybe it's around 10 minutes. Notice what that state feels like. Your brain needs to relearn it. The only way to relearn it is to stay through the alarm enough times the brain stops treating focus as a threat. That's what your brain is doing, treating focus as a threat. This is neuroplasticity, everybody. The brain's ability to rewire itself through repeated experience, working in your favor instead of against you. You are retraining that smoke detector in your brain. There are so many different applications of this 10-minute rule, and here are 4 specific applications that you can try, starting with work tasks and extending to anywhere your nervous system currently treats starting as a threat or continuing past 30 seconds. Number 1, of course, is work. I love a Pomodoro timer. I have one here on my desk, actually. A Pomodoro timer will give you a certain amount of time that you are going to focus on a particular task. Set the timer for 25 minutes. The job for the first 10 minutes is not to produce good work. That's not the problem. That's not the issue. It's to stay through the alarm. Do not assess quality. Do not judge output. Do not switch. Just stay. I want to be direct here. This particular tool has personally made the 10-minute rule usable on my hardest days, Mondays especially. The timer does something specific that willpower alone cannot always do. It gives you the amygdala a finite commitment. The threat system can tolerate 25 minutes. In a way, it's struggled to tolerate until I am done, which is what I used to do. Just get work until you're done, but your brain doesn't have a good way of motivating you when you know you can do other things and that amygdala is running really hot. An alarm says you are missing something. A timer says nothing is required of you right now except this. That is the signal the nervous system can receive. After the first 10 minutes, most people find that work has its own momentum. It's like rolling downhill. The remaining 15 minutes are not effort, they are flow. And oftentimes you'll find that you don't want to stop. You want to continue to go. Go, go, go. Focus until you need to take a break. And the key with that is that we definitely focus in blocks. So be aware that up to about 25 to 30 minutes is usually our best window before taking a break. Sometimes for some of us up to about 50 minutes, but that's it. So while you're in flow, while you've gotten past that 10 minutes, drop in there and get it done. Right? Now, another way you can use the 10-minute rule, one way I've used in the past, is with meditation. As soon as you try to start meditating, your mind is going to go pretty crazy, right? You sit down, all of a sudden you feel restless and you think of everything you're supposed to do and everything you didn't do and everything that needs to be done, right? But if you can stay past that 10-minute mark, usually that's when things start calming down. The brain realizes that you're here for a little while and everything's going to be okay. And so you can really drop into your meditation practice. Another way is new skills. If you're trying to learn a new skill, actually 10 minutes daily beats 1 hour weekly, because it's that 10 minutes, it's that little bump that again will give you more momentum to maintain even longer than that 10 minutes once you get through that 10-minute window. Let me just say this too. If this alarm window feels overwhelming, physically distressing rather than just uncomfortable, that's a signal that the baseline nervous system state needs attention before the 10-minute rule can work properly. As I mentioned earlier, this is the sympathetic spiral of doom. And I know this sounds ominous, but all this means is you have to focus on basic things, small wins. If 10 minutes is too long, that's okay. Start with 2 minutes. Start with getting consistent sleep, daily movement, regular meals, optimize mitochondrial function, that part of your cell that makes energy. Remember, I've said this many times on this channel so far, and I will continue. It's always about energy first, meaning that you have to focus on how your cells are making energy well. If you can't get to 10 minutes without significant issues, it's often because you have an energy deficit. This is, in my world, a clinical issue. You optimize vitamins, minerals, nutrients, and cofactors. You optimize the stress response, energy first wise. You see fantastic changes. Thank you so much for listening to another episode of Cellular Truth, where we dive into topics that are interesting, that are challenging, but the 10-minute rule will change your life if you just start with it. Start with 10 minutes and watch your concentration, your focus flow so much better than it ever has, or at least in a long time, if you're like me.